4 German shepherds, was trapped inside an old water tower. What baby did next left everyone in tears. What you're about to hear will absolutely shock you and make you believe that miracles still happen in this world. Before we begin this incredible story, please like, share, and subscribe, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. The morning sun barely touched the abandoned industrial district on the outskirts of Millbrook when 5-year-old Tommy Rivera woke up with that strange feeling again. It was the same sensation he'd been having for weeks now, like something was calling him, whispering in a language that wasn't quite words but somehow made perfect sense to his young mind. His parents, Marcus and Elena Rivera, had noticed their son's peculiar behavior lately, but they attributed it to him starting kindergarten soon, and the natural anxieties that came with growing up. Tommy was different from other children his age, and not just in the way that every parent thinks their child is special. While other 5-year-olds chattered constantly about cartoons and toys, Tommy would sit quietly for hours, his head tilted slightly as if listening to conversations no one else could hear. His large brown eyes would focus on empty spaces, and sometimes he would nod or shake his head as if responding to invisible questions. The pediatrician had assured Marcus and Elena that Tommy was perfectly healthy, just perhaps more imaginative than most children. "Tommy, breakfast is ready," Elena called from the kitchen, her voice carrying the warmth that filled their modest 2-story home. The smell of scrambled eggs and toast drifted up the stairs, but Tommy remained at his bedroom window, his small hands pressed against the cool glass, staring out at the distant industrial area that bordered their neighborhood. "Mommy, they're so sad," Tommy whispered when Elena came to check on him, finding him still in his dinosaur pajamas, his dark hair sticking up at odd angles from sleep. "Who's sad, sweetheart?" Elena asked, smoothing down his unruly hair with gentle fingers. She followed his gaze out the window, but saw nothing except the usual view of empty lots and the old abandoned water tower that had stood vacant for the past decade. "I don't know their names yet," Tommy replied, his voice distant and dreamy. "But they're crying. They've been crying for 2 days now." Elena felt a small shiver run down her spine. This wasn't the first time Tommy had said something like this. Last month, he had insisted that Mrs. Patterson's cat was sick, even though the cat seemed perfectly fine. 3 days later, the elderly neighbor had rushed her pet to the vet, where they discovered a serious infection that would have been fatal if left untreated. Tommy had somehow known. Marcus appeared in the doorway, already dressed for his Saturday shift at the construction company. "Everything okay?" he asked, noticing the concerned expression on his wife's face. "Tommy says someone is sad," Elena explained, trying to keep her voice light. "Someone crying near the old industrial area." Marcus walked over and lifted Tommy into his strong arms, the boy immediately wrapping his small arms around his father's neck. "You know what? Since I don't have to work until this afternoon, why don't we have that picnic we've been planning? We can go to the park near the old factory district. Would you like that?" Tommy's eyes lit up with an intensity that surprised both parents. Yes, we have to go there. They need help, Daddy. They're so scared and hungry." Marcus and Elena exchanged glances over their son's head. They had learned not to completely dismiss Tommy's strange intuitions, but this seemed different somehow, more urgent. Elena quickly packed a picnic basket with sandwiches, fruit, and juice boxes, while Marcus helped Tommy get dressed in his favorite blue t-shirt and jeans. The drive to the park took only 15 minutes, but Tommy grew increasingly agitated with each passing moment. He kept turning in his car seat, looking out the windows, his small body practically vibrating with nervous energy. "Faster, Daddy, please." "They're getting weaker." "Tommy, honey, who are they?" Elena asked, turning in the passenger seat to look at her son. "Can you tell Mommy who you're talking about?" Tommy's face scrunched up in concentration, as if he was trying to translate something from a language he didn't quite understand. 4 of them. They're brothers and sisters. They're up high, so high, and they can't get down. The bad man left them there. Marcus pulled into the parking area near the old park, which sat in the shadow of the abandoned industrial complex. The massive water tower loomed overhead, its rusted steel structure a testament to the area's forgotten past. The tower hadn't been used in over a decade, not since the factory had closed and taken most of the town's jobs with it. As soon as Marcus unbuckled Tommy's car seat, The boy took off running, not toward the playground, but straight toward the fence that separated the park from the industrial area. "Tommy, stop!" Marcus shouted, sprinting after his son with Elena close behind. Tommy stood at the chain-link fence, his small fingers wrapped around the metal links, tears streaming down his face. "Up there, Daddy! They're up there in the tower. Can't you hear them crying?" Marcus knelt beside his son, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Tommy, there's nothing up there. The tower's been empty for years." "No!" Tommy's voice rose to a near scream, his whole body shaking. "They're dying! The puppies are dying!" Elena's hand flew to her mouth. "Puppies?" Tommy nodded frantically, pointing up at the water tower. "4 puppies, German shepherds. Someone put them up there and took away the ladder so they can't get down. They haven't had water for 2 days. The smallest one is very sick." Marcus stood up, shading his eyes against the morning sun as he studied the water tower. It stood about 60 feet tall, with the tank portion starting at about 30 feet up. The access ladder that once ran up the side had indeed been removed, leaving only rusted mounting brackets. "Elena, I'm going to check it out." "Marcus, be careful," Elena warned, pulling Tommy close to her. The boy was sobbing now, his small body trembling with emotion. Marcus found a section of fence that had been cut, probably by local teenagers who used the abandoned area for parties. He squeezed through and jogged toward the water tower, his work boots crunching on the gravel and broken glass that littered the ground. As he got closer, he stopped and listened. At first he heard nothing but the wind whistling through the rusted structure. Then, faint but unmistakable, he heard it, a weak whimpering sound coming from above. His heart racing, Marcus circled the tower until he found what used to be the access point. The ladder had been deliberately removed, the cuts in the metal fresh, maybe only a few days old. On the ground near the tower's base, he spotted something that made his blood run cold. A small pile of dog food, just out of reach, as if someone had wanted the animals to see it, but not be able to get to it. Marcus pulled out his phone and called Elena. "Call 911. There really are dogs up there. Someone's trapped them in the water tank." Within 20 minutes, a fire truck had arrived, along with 2 police cars and an animal control van. The fire chief, a burly man named Captain Rodriguez, surveyed the situation with a grim expression. "That's a 30-foot climb without a ladder, and the structure's not stable. We'd need special equipment, maybe a crane. It would take hours to get it here, maybe tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" Elena exclaimed, still holding Tommy, who had stopped crying, but was now eerily quiet, his eyes fixed on the tower. "They'll die by tomorrow." The animal control officer, a thin man with a permanent frown, shrugged. "Might be more humane to let nature take its course. If they're wild dogs or strays, they could be diseased, dangerous. Not worth risking human lives for." Tommy suddenly pulled away from his mother and walked up to Captain Rodriguez. "Please, sir. They're not wild, they're just babies. Someone hurt them because they saw something bad. The smallest one, her name is Luna. She's only 8 weeks old. She won't make it through the night." The fire chief looked down at the boy, clearly unsettled by the specific details. "Son, how could you possibly know their age or names?" Tommy's eyes filled with fresh tears. "They're showing me. In my head, like pictures. The bad man, he had a tattoo of a snake on his arm. He brought them here in a black truck 3 nights ago. They were supposed to guard a place where bad things happen, but they were too young, too friendly. So, he threw them up there to die." Detective Patricia Mills, who had arrived with the police units, knelt down to Tommy's level. "Can you tell me more about this bad man?" Tommy closed his eyes, his face scrunching in concentration. "His name starts with a V. Victor?" "Yes, Victor. He has a big house on Riverside Drive. The puppies remember the smell of chemicals, bad chemicals that made them sick." Detective Mills stood up quickly, exchanging glances with her partner. Victor Brennan lived on Riverside Drive, and they'd been investigating him for months for suspected drug manufacturing, but they'd never been able to get enough evidence for a warrant. "We need to get those dogs down," Detective Mills said firmly. "They could be evidence in an ongoing investigation." Captain Rodriguez shook his head. "I'm sorry, Detective, but I can't risk my men's lives on unstable structure. The liability alone—" "I'll sign a waiver," Marcus interrupted. "I work construction. I've climbed worse. Just give me some basic equipment, and I'll go up myself." "Absolutely not," Elena said, grabbing her husband's arm. "Marcus, you could fall. You could die." "Daddy, no," Tommy said, but his voice was strange, distant. "It has to be me. They're too scared of grown-ups. They'll jump if anyone else comes up. They're showing me the way." Before anyone could respond, Tommy had slipped through the gap in the fence and was running toward the tower. His small size allowed him to move quickly through the adults who tried to grab him. He reached the tower's base and, to everyone's amazement, found handholds and footholds in the rusted structure that the adults hadn't noticed. "Tommy, no!" Elena screamed, but her son was already 10 feet up, climbing with a confidence that seemed impossible for a 5-year-old. "Get him down!" Captain Rodriguez shouted, but Tommy was climbing faster now, his small body moving with an almost supernatural grace. Marcus ran to the tower's base. "Tommy, please come down! This is dangerous!" "They're helping me, Daddy!" Tommy called down, his voice carried by the wind. "They're showing me where to put my hands and feet. They've been watching the birds that nest up here. They know the safe spots." The crowd below watched in horrified fascination as the small boy continued his ascent. Elena was sobbing, held back by Detective Mills, who was calling for additional backup and an ambulance to stand by. Marcus had started climbing after his son, but was moving much slower, his larger body and adult fear making him more cautious. At 20 feet, Tommy paused, pressing himself against the tower's structure. From below they could hear him talking, though his words were too soft to make out. It sounded like he was having a conversation, reassuring someone. "The structure's shifting," one of the firefighters said, pointing to areas where rust had eaten through the support beams. "If too much weight gets on the wrong spot..." Tommy reached the tank level at 30 feet. There was a small access hatch, barely large enough for a child to squeeze through. As the crowd watched, Tommy pulled at the hatch. It had been welded shut, but the weld was poor, hasty, with strength that seemed impossible for his small frame. Tommy managed to break the weld and pull the hatch open. Immediately, weak barking and whimpering could be heard from inside. Tommy disappeared into the tank, and for several heart-stopping moments, there was silence. Then Tommy's voice echoed from inside the tank. "I found them. They're alive, but they're very weak. Luna can barely breathe." Dr. Sarah Chen, a retired veterinarian who had been walking her own dog in the park, pushed through the crowd. "I have emergency supplies in my car," she announced. "If we can get the puppies down, I can help them." "Tommy, can you hand them out one at a time?" Marcus called up, having climbed to just below the tank. "They're too scared of you, Daddy," Tommy's voice came back. "But I have an idea. Dr. Chen, can you come to the bottom of the tower? They can smell that you help animals. You're not scary like the others." Dr. Chen, despite being in her 60s, immediately moved to the tower's base. "I'm here, Tommy. What do you need me to do?" "I'm going to lower them down one at a time, but I need rope." "Is there rope?" Captain Rodriguez quickly had his men retrieve rescue rope from the truck. Marcus climbed down carefully and tied the rope to a rescue basket they used for small animals. Then he climbed back up, moving faster now despite the danger, his parental instinct overriding his caution. "Tommy, I'm sending up the basket," Marcus called, using all his strength to haul the basket up, while maintaining his precarious position on the tower. Inside the tank, Tommy found 4 German Shepherd puppies, just as he had described. They were severely dehydrated, covered in their own waste, and the smallest one, Luna, was barely conscious. The tank was stifling hot, having been baking in the sun for days. The puppies had survived by licking condensation from the metal walls, but it hadn't been nearly enough. Tommy gently picked up Luna first, whispering to her constantly, "It's okay, little one. I know you're scared. I can see what he did to you. I can see the bad place with all the tables and the glass bottles and the scary smells. But you're safe now. You're all going to be safe." He placed Luna in the basket, making sure she was secure. The puppy was too weak to struggle, her small body limp and burning with fever. Tommy carefully lowered the basket down to his father, who then lowered it to the ground where Dr. Chen immediately began administering fluids through a small syringe. One by one, Tommy rescued the puppies. The second was a male he said was named Max, though no one questioned how he knew this. Max was in better condition, but had an injured paw, the pad torn and infected. The third was another female, Bella, who despite her weakness, tried to lick Tommy's face in gratitude. The fourth, Duke, was the largest, and had been trying to protect the others, positioning himself between them and the hot metal wall of the tank. As Tommy prepared to climb down, something strange happened. He suddenly went rigid, his eyes rolling back in his head. Marcus, still clinging to the tower, watched in horror as his son seemed to have some kind of seizure. "Tommy!" he screamed, reaching for his son, but Tommy was still inside the tank, just out of reach. Then, just as suddenly, Tommy's eyes snapped back to normal, but they were different somehow. Older, filled with knowledge no 5-year-old should have. "Daddy, we have to hurry. Victor Brennan knows the puppies are gone. He's coming. He's very angry. He's bringing Jake Morrison and 2 other men. They have guns." "How could you possibly know that?" Marcus asked, even as he helped Tommy out of the tank. "The puppies can smell them. They remember their scent. They're 10 minutes away. We have to get down now." The descent was even more harrowing than the climb up. Tommy moved with that same unnatural grace, but Marcus could see his son's small body trembling with exhaustion. The crowd below had grown larger, with news vans arriving and reporters setting up cameras. The story of the boy who climbed the tower to save puppies was already spreading on social media. They were still 15 feet up when a black SUV screeched into the parking lot. 4 men got out, led by a well-dressed man with silver hair and cold eyes, Victor Brennan. Behind him was Jake Morrison, his security chief, a mountain of a man with a snake tattoo visible on his forearm. "Those are my dogs!" Brennan shouted, pushing through the crowd. "They were stolen from my property. I demand they be returned immediately." Detective Mills stepped forward, her hand on her service weapon. "Mr. Brennan, these puppies were found trapped in an abandoned water tower. That's animal cruelty, a felony offense." "You can't prove I had anything to do with that," Brennan said smoothly. "My dogs were stolen 3 days ago. I filed a report. Someone else must have put them there." Tommy, now safely on the ground and running to where Dr. Chen was treating the puppies, suddenly turned to face Brennan. "You're lying. You put them there because they saw your laboratory in the basement. They saw the blue chemicals that you cooked to make the bad drugs. They smelled the ammonia and the phosphorus. Luna chewed through one of the tubes, and you got so angry you kicked her." Brennan's face went pale. Those were specific details about his methamphetamine operation that no one outside his inner circle should know. "The boy is obviously disturbed," he said, but his voice had lost its confident edge. "Luna remembers everything," Tommy continued, his young voice carrying across the now silent crowd. "She remembers the address on the boxes, 4427 Industrial Boulevard, Unit B. She remembers the man with the scar on his cheek who comes every Tuesday to pick up packages. She remembers the hidden room behind the furnace where you keep the money." Detective Mills was already on her radio, calling for backup and a warrant. The details Tommy was providing matched intelligence they had gathered but hadn't been able to confirm. Jake Morrison stepped forward menacingly. "Mr. Brennan, perhaps we should go." "Not so fast," Captain Rodriguez said, as several firefighters moved to block their path. "There's the matter of animal cruelty charges." "You can't hold us based on the fantasies of a child," Brennan snarled, but sweat was beading on his forehead. Tommy walked over to Luna, who despite her weakness was trying to lift her head. He gently stroked her fur, and she managed a weak tail wag. "She says the proof is in the white van. You forgot to clean it after you brought them here. Their blood is on the floor where you threw them in. Their fur is caught in the door seal." 2 police officers immediately headed to the parking lot, where a white van was parked near Brennan's SUV. Using flashlights, they could see through the windows what appeared to be bloodstains and fur in the cargo area. "We're going to need to impound that vehicle," Detective Mills announced. Morrison reached inside his jacket, but 3 officers immediately drew their weapons. "Hands where we can see them!" one shouted. The crowd, which had been filming everything on their phones, backed away quickly. Parents grabbed their children and retreated to safer distances. Elena tried to pull Tommy away, but he stood firm beside the puppies. "They're not going to hurt anyone," Tommy said calmly. "They're too scared. The puppies can smell their fear. Victor Brennan is thinking about running. Jake Morrison is thinking about the gun in his ankle holster. The other 2 men are wondering if they should cooperate with the police." "How is he doing this?" someone in the crowd whispered. Dr. Chen, still working on the puppies, looked up. "I've heard of this before. There are documented cases of children who seem to have a telepathic connection with animals, especially in traumatic situations. The trauma these puppies experienced may have created a psychic bond with the boy." "That's ridiculous," Brennan spat, but his eyes kept darting to Tommy with something that looked like fear. Tommy suddenly gasped, his hand flying to his head. "They're remembering more. There's a book, a red notebook in Victor's office. It has all the names, all the people who buy the bad drugs. It's hidden in the fake bottom drawer of his desk." Brennan lunged forward, trying to get to Tommy, but Marcus stepped in his way, his construction-hardened fist connecting with Brennan's jaw. The older man went down hard, and Morrison reached for his ankle, but the police were ready. They tackled him before he could draw his weapon. Within minutes, all 4 men were in handcuffs. Detective Mills was coordinating with other units to execute search warrants at Brennan's properties, based on the probable cause Tommy's strange revelations had provided. Dr. Chen had managed to stabilize all 4 puppies, though Luna remained in critical condition. "They need to get to my clinic immediately," she said. "I have the equipment there to properly treat them." "I'm coming with them," Tommy said firmly. "Tommy, you need to rest," Elena said, kneeling beside her son. "You did an amazing thing, but you could have been hurt. You could have died." Tommy looked at his mother with those strange, too old eyes. "They would have died if I didn't help them. Sometimes you have to do the scary thing because it's the right thing. Isn't that what you and Daddy always teach me?" Marcus knelt down too, pulling his son into a tight hug. "We do teach you that, buddy. But we never expected you to have to be so brave so young." "The puppies made me brave," Tommy whispered. "They showed me how to be strong even when you're scared." Dr. Chen carefully loaded the puppies into her van, which she had equipped as a mobile veterinary unit. Tommy insisted on riding with them, and after seeing the calming effect he had on the animals, Dr. Chen agreed. The drive to the clinic was surreal. Tommy sat in the back, one hand on each puppy, whispering constantly. Sometimes he would relay information to Dr. Chen. "Max's paw hurts more than he's showing. Bella is allergic to penicillin. Duke had a brother who died last week." Each piece of information seemed impossible for him to know. Yet when Dr. Chen checked, the physical evidence supported what Tommy was saying. At the clinic, Dr. Chen worked through the afternoon and into the evening. Tommy refused to leave, and his parents, recognizing that something extraordinary was happening, didn't force him. He helped in ways that seemed impossible, knowing exactly when a puppy was about to panic, sensing when pain medication was wearing off, even alerting Dr. Chen to a dangerous drop in Luna's blood pressure before the monitors showed it. "In 40 years of veterinary practice, Dr. Chen said to Marcus and Elena, I've never seen anything like this. Your son has a gift. A remarkable, possibly unprecedented gift." As night fell, Luna's condition worsened. Her little body, already pushed to its limits by days without proper food and water, was shutting down. Dr. Chen prepared Marcus and Elena for the worst. "No," Tommy said firmly. "She's not going to die. She promised me." "Tommy, honey," Elena said gently. "Sometimes, even when we try our hardest." "No!" Tommy's voice rose. He placed both hands on Luna's tiny body, and something strange happened. The room seemed to grow warmer, and the air felt charged, like before a thunderstorm. Tommy's eyes closed, and he began to hum, a wordless melody that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside him. The monitors showing Luna's vital signs began to change. Her heart rate, which had been dangerously low, started to stabilize. Her breathing, which had been shallow and labored, became deeper and more regular. Her body temperature, which had been dropping despite the heating pads, began to rise. Dr. Chen stared at the monitors in disbelief. This is not medically possible." Tommy continued humming for several more minutes, his small body swaying slightly. When he finally stopped and opened his eyes, Luna's eyes opened too. The puppy looked directly at Tommy and gave a weak but definite tail wag. "She says thank you," Tommy whispered, then collapsed into his father's arms, exhausted. They stayed at the clinic that night, Tommy sleeping on a cot. Dr. Chen had set up near the puppy's recovery area. Every time one of the puppies whimpered, Tommy would stir, mumble something comforting, and they would settle. It was as if an invisible thread connected them, allowing communication beyond words or even conscious thought. The next morning brought a media storm. The story of the boy who had climbed the water tower had gone viral overnight. 5-year-old boy risks life to save puppies was trending on every social media platform. News vans surrounded the veterinary clinic, and reporters were desperate for interviews. But The real storm came from the police investigation. Based on Tommy's strange revelations, they had raided Brennan's properties and found exactly what Tommy had described: a massive drug operation, the red notebook with client names, even the hidden room behind the furnace filled with cash. It was one of the largest drug busts in the state's history. Detective Mills came to the clinic that morning, looking exhausted but satisfied. "We've arrested 17 people so far based on the information in that notebook. Brennan's lawyer is trying to claim the search was illegal because we based it on the word of a child who claims dogs told him where to look, but the physical evidence is overwhelming." "What will happen to the puppies?" Tommy asked, standing protectively near their kennel. "Well, technically they're evidence now," Detective Mills said, then smiled at Tommy's stricken expression. "But I think we can arrange for them to stay in protective custody with a suitable foster family. Know anyone who might be interested?" Tommy's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Really? We can keep them?" Marcus and Elena exchanged glances. They lived in a modest house with a small yard. Taking on 4 German Shepherd puppies would be a huge responsibility and expense. But looking at their son's face and seeing how the puppies all turned toward him as if he were their son, they knew the decision was already made. "We'll need a bigger yard," Marcus said finally. "And a lot of dog food," Elena added. Tommy threw his arms around his parents, tears of joy streaming down his face. "They promised to be good. They'll protect our house and help other animals who are hurt. Duke wants to be a police dog when he grows up. Max wants to help kids who are scared. Bella wants to visit sick people in hospitals. And Luna," he paused, looking at the smallest puppy, who was now standing on shaky legs. "Luna wants to stay with me always and help me understand what animals are saying." Dr. Chen cleared her throat. "There's something else you should know. I've been in contact with some colleagues at the university. They'd like to study Tommy's connection with the puppies. Not in an invasive way," she added quickly, seeing Elena's protective instinct flare. "Just to understand it better. This could help us learn new ways to help traumatized animals, maybe even improve how we train service dogs." Over the next several weeks, the Rivera family's life changed dramatically. Their story had captured the nation's attention. Donations poured in from people touched by Tommy's bravery and compassion. A construction company, impressed by Marcus's own attempted rescue, offered him a better position with the flexibility to help care for the puppies. A pet food company provided free food for a year. A local contractor volunteered to expand their fence and build a proper dog run. But the most remarkable changes were in Tommy and the puppies themselves. As the German Shepherds grew stronger, their bond with Tommy only deepened. He seemed to know what each one was thinking and feeling at any given moment. When Max developed a limp, Tommy knew it was from a thorn in his paw before anyone could see it. When Bella seemed off her food, Tommy explained she had a toothache, which the vet confirmed. The university researchers were fascinated. They ran test after test, always with Tommy's and his parents' consent, trying to understand the connection. They discovered that Tommy's brainwaves would synchronize with the puppies when they were together. When separated, both Tommy and the puppies showed signs of distress that went beyond normal separation anxiety. One researcher, Dr. Patricia Hawkins, theorized that the traumatic circumstances of their meeting had created a quantum entanglement at the consciousness level. "It sounds like science fiction," she admitted, "but we're seeing measurable, repeatable phenomena that we can't explain any other way." 3 months after the rescue, something disturbing happened. Tommy woke up screaming in the middle of the night, clutching his head. "They're hurting them!" he cried. "Other puppies, other animals! The bad men have another place." The puppies were all barking, agitated, pacing in their room. Luna had somehow opened her kennel and was scratching at Tommy's bedroom door. Detective Mills, who had given the family her personal number, arrived within minutes of Elena's call. She found Tommy in the living room, surrounded by all 4 puppies, his eyes closed, tears streaming down his face. "There's another tower," he whispered. "Not water this time, an old grain silo on the Hendricks farm. But it's not just puppies. There are cats, rabbits, even a baby goat. They're using them to test the bad drugs to see how strong they are." "Tommy, how can you know this?" Detective Mills asked gently. Tommy opened his eyes, and they were filled with a pain no child should know. "Luna can feel them. All animals can feel each other when they're really scared or hurt. It's like a network of pain. She's showing me what she feels." Detective Mills immediately called for backup. Within an hour, they had raided the Hendricks farm, which had been abandoned for years. They found exactly what Tommy had described: a makeshift laboratory where Brennan's associates had been testing their drugs on animals before selling them. 15 animals were rescued that night, all in various states of distress. The story made national news again. "Psychic boy saves more animals," ran in headlines across the country. But for Tommy and his family, the attention was becoming overwhelming. Reporters camped outside their house. People with missing pets begged Tommy to help find them. Parents of autistic children wondered if Tommy could teach their kids to communicate with animals. The pressure was enormous for a 5-year-old boy. It was Elena who made the decision. "We're moving," she announced one evening. "Dr. Chen has offered us the caretaker's cottage on her property. It's more isolated, has acres for the dogs to run, and Tommy can help at her rehabilitation center for abused animals." The move was the best thing they could have done. The cottage was perfect, small but cozy, surrounded by woods and fields. The puppies, now growing rapidly, had room to run and play, and Tommy could work with Dr. Chen, helping to rehabilitate animals that had been abused or traumatized. It was there that Tommy's gift truly flourished. He worked with dogs that had been fought, cats that had been tortured, horses that had been starved. Each time he would sit quietly with them, his hands gentle, his voice soft, and somehow communicate that they were safe now. The animals that veterinarians and animal behaviorists had given up on would respond to Tommy in ways that defied explanation. "He doesn't just talk to them, Doctor," Chen observed. "He shares their pain, processes it with them, and somehow helps them let it go. It's the most remarkable thing I've ever witnessed." But the gift came with a cost. Tommy would often experience the trauma the animals had endured. He would have nightmares filled with images of abuse and cruelty. His parents watched their cheerful little boy become more serious, more thoughtful, older than his years. It was Luna who helped him most during these difficult times. The smallest of the puppies had grown into a beautiful, intelligent dog who never left Tommy's side. When the nightmares came, she would crawl into his bed, pressing her warm body against his, and somehow take some of the pain away. Their connection was the strongest, perhaps because she had been the closest to death when they met. 6 months after the water tower rescue, Victor Brennan's trial began. Tommy was called as a witness, though the judge was skeptical about allowing such a young child to testify. But when Tommy took the stand, with Luna's special permission to sit at his feet as a certified emotional support animal, his testimony was clear, detailed, and devastating to Brennan's defense. He described things only someone who had been inside Brennan's operation could know. When Brennan's lawyer tried to suggest Tommy had been coached, Tommy looked directly at the man and said, "You're scared too. You know your client is guilty. You have a dog at home, a golden retriever named Buddy, and you're afraid of what Mr. Brennan might do to him if you don't win this case." The lawyer went pale. He did have a golden retriever named Buddy, a fact he had never shared with anyone involved in the case. Brennan was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 30 years in prison. His network was dismantled, and dozens of animals were rescued from various locations. Each time, Tommy seemed to know where they were, what they needed, how to help them heal. As Tommy's 6th birthday approached, his parents planned a small celebration at the cottage. But the morning of his birthday, Tommy woke with a different kind of urgency. "Something's coming," he told his parents. "Something important." The puppies, now almost full-grown, were all alert, watching the driveway. An hour later, a car pulled up, and a family got out, parents and a young girl about Tommy's age. The girl had leg braces and walked with difficulty, but her face lit up when she saw the dogs. "This is Lily," her mother explained. "She was in an accident 6 months ago. The doctor said she might never walk normally again. We heard about Tommy and wondered, hoped, maybe he could help." Tommy walked over to Lily, and their eyes met. Something passed between them, an understanding beyond words. "You can hear them too," Tommy said softly. Lily nodded, tears in her eyes. "Since the accident. But no one believes me." Tommy took her hand and led her to where the dogs were waiting. Duke, the largest and gentlest of the 4, immediately walked to Lily's side, positioning himself so she could lean on him for support. "Duke says he wants to help you walk," Tommy translated. "He says he knows what it's like to be hurt and scared. He wants to be your friend." Over the following weeks, Lily and her family visited regularly. Duke and Lily formed a bond almost as strong as Tommy and Luna's. With Duke's patient support, Lily began to walk more confidently. Her physical therapy sessions improved dramatically when Duke was present. The doctors couldn't explain it, but they couldn't deny the results either. Word of Lily's improvement spread, and soon other children with various challenges came to the cottage. Children with autism who couldn't speak would communicate through the dogs. Kids with PTSD from abuse found comfort and healing. Each time, Tommy would facilitate the connection, helping the children understand what the animals were offering. Dr. Chen officially established the Rivera Chen Animal Therapy Center, with Tommy as its and youngest consultant. Universities sent researchers to study the phenomenon. Documentaries were made, books were written. But for Tommy, it was never about the fame or the recognition. It was about the moment when a frightened animal's eyes would soften with trust, or when a child who had given up hope would smile again. One evening, as the sun set over the cottage, Tommy sat on the porch with all 4 dogs around him. His parents watched from the doorway as their son, now 6 years old, but with the wisdom of someone much older, gazed out at the peaceful scene. "Do you ever regret it?" Elena asked. "The way your life has changed?" Tommy looked up at his parents, then at Luna, who was as always pressed against his side. "How can I regret it? They needed help, and I could hear them. If I hadn't climbed that tower, they would have died. And all the animals we've helped since then, all the kids who can walk or talk or smile again because of what the dogs taught them. How could I regret any of that?" Marcus sat down beside his son, pulling him close. "You're pretty amazing, you know that?" Tommy shook his head. "I'm not amazing. I just listen. Most people have forgotten how to really listen. The animals never forgot. They're always talking, always sharing, always connected. I just remembered how to hear them." As if in agreement, all 4 dogs barked softly, their voices harmonizing in the evening air. In the distance, other dogs answered, then more, until it seemed like every dog in the county was joining the chorus. It was beautiful and haunting, a reminder that connections exist beyond human understanding, that love and loyalty transcend species, and that sometimes the smallest among us can be the bravest. The story of Tommy and the 4 German shepherds spread far beyond their small town. It inspired animal welfare laws, funded rescue operations, and changed how people thought about the consciousness of animals. But more than that, it reminded the world that courage comes in all sizes, that children often see truths adults miss, and that the bond between humans and animals is one of the most powerful forces on Earth. As the months turned into years, Tommy's gift only grew stronger. By the time he was 7, he was working with zoo animals, helping keepers understand behavioral problems. By 8, he was consulting with marine biologists about dolphin communication. By 9, he had testified before Congress about animal welfare, with Luna by his side, as always. The 4 German shepherds grew into magnificent adults, each with their own special role. Duke became a certified therapy dog, working with disabled children. Max joined the police force as a search and rescue dog, his ability to sense fear and distress making him invaluable in finding lost people. Bella worked in hospitals, somehow knowing which patients needed comfort most. And Luna stayed with Tommy, his constant companion and translator in the animal kingdom. But perhaps the most remarkable development came when Tommy was 10. He had been working with a group of researchers studying elephant communication when he suddenly announced, "They're not just talking to each other. They're talking to elephants hundreds of miles away. They can feel the earth's vibrations through their feet. They know when other elephants are in trouble, when babies are born, when the old ones die. They have a network that spans continents." This revelation led to groundbreaking research in animal communication and conservation efforts. Protecting one group of elephants meant understanding their connection to groups across vast distances. Tommy's insights revolutionized wildlife conservation, leading to new international protections for migrating species. Yet, for all his extraordinary abilities, Tommy remained in many ways a normal kid. He went to school, played video games, argued with his parents about bedtime. But he carried within him a connection to the natural world that few humans had ever experienced. He felt the joy of birds in spring, the contentment of cats in sunbeams, the loyalty of dogs waiting for their humans to come home. The burden of this gift was heavy. Tommy often knew when animals were being hurt anywhere in the vicinity. He would wake crying from dreams of factory farms, laboratory experiments, abandoned pets. His parents did their best to shield him, but Tommy insisted that knowing was part of his responsibility. "If I can hear them," he would say, "then I have to help them. That's why I have this gift." The water tower still stood at the edge of town, a rusted monument to cruelty transformed into a symbol of hope. The city council voted to preserve it, adding a plaque that read, "Here, a 5-year-old boy heard the cries others ignored and chose courage over safety." May we all listen with such open hearts. Visitors came from around the world to see it, to stand where Tommy had stood, to wonder if they too might hear what he had heard. Some claimed they could feel something there, a residual energy of fear transformed into love. Others saw only an old tower, rusty and obsolete. But for those who knew the whole story, who had witnessed Tommy's journey from a quiet, unusual little boy to a bridge between species, the tower represented something profound. It stood as proof that miracles still happen, that children can be heroes, that animals have souls worth saving, and that sometimes, just sometimes, love is stronger than cruelty. Hope defeats despair, and a single act of courage can change the world. The story of Tommy Rivera and the 4 German shepherds had spread throughout the state, but what happened next would shake the entire nation. As Tommy grew stronger in his gift, working with more animals a doctor, Chen's rehabilitation center, something dark was stirring in the shadows of Millbrook. Victor Brennan might have been in prison, but his network hadn't completely died. There were others who had learned about Tommy's abilities, and they had very different plans for the boy who could speak to animals. It started with small things that Marcus noticed first. Cars driving slowly past the cottage at odd hours, the same faces appearing at the rehabilitation center day after day, pretending to be interested in adopting animals, but never filling out paperwork. Phone calls where the caller would hang up as soon as someone answered. Marcus's construction instincts, honed from years of reading situations and people on job sites, told him something was wrong. "Elena, I think we're being watched again," he said one evening as they cleaned up after dinner. Tommy was in the living room with the dogs, all 5 of them sprawled on the floor while he did his homework. Elena paused in washing dishes, her hands still in the soapy water. "Are you sure? It's been so peaceful these past few months." "That's what worries me," Marcus replied, moving to the window and carefully checking the tree line. "Duke and Max have been agitated lately. They keep patrolling the property boundaries at night. And Tommy..." He paused, lowering his voice. "Have you noticed he's been having more nightmares?" Elena had noticed. Their son would wake up gasping, not from dreams of animal suffering this time, but from something else. When they asked him about it, he would just say the animals were worried about something coming, but he couldn't see what it was clearly. 3 days later, Dr. Chen called them with concerning news. "Someone tried to break into the clinic last night," she said, her usually calm voice tight with worry. "They didn't take anything from the pharmacy or the cash register, but they went through all of Tommy's files, the research notes about his abilities, the videos of him working with the animals." Marcus gripped the phone tighter. "Did the security cameras catch anything?" "That's the strange part, Doctor," Chen replied. "The cameras were disabled with some kind of jamming device. Very sophisticated, not your average burglar. I've already called Detective Mills." That afternoon, Detective Mills arrived at the cottage with troubling information. "We've been tracking some concerning chatter," she said, sitting at their kitchen table, while Tommy played outside with the dogs, safely within sight. "There's a group, calls themselves the Biological Research Foundation, that's been asking questions about Tommy. They claim to be studying human-animal communication for medical purposes, but something doesn't feel right." "What kind of medical purposes?" Elena asked, though her maternal instinct already told her she wouldn't like the answer. Detective Mills pulled out a folder. "They say they want to understand how Tommy's brain works, that it could lead to breakthroughs in treating autism, helping nonverbal patients communicate. On the surface, it sounds legitimate. They've even offered the university a substantial grant to study Tommy more intensively." "But," Marcus prompted, "but when we dig deeper, the foundation's funding comes from some questionable sources. Shell companies, offshore accounts, the kind of financial maze that usually means someone's hiding something. And get this, one of their board members is Nathaniel Brennan, Victor's younger brother. Elena's hand flew to her mouth. They're coming after Tommy because of what he did to Victor? That's what we're trying to figure out, Detective Mills said. For now, I'm assigning increased patrols around the property. And Tommy should never be alone, especially at school or the rehabilitation center. Outside, Tommy suddenly stood up from where he'd been sitting with the dogs. All 4 German shepherds were on their feet too, hackles raised, staring at the woods. Tommy's face had that distant look his parents knew so well. "Mommy, Daddy," he called, his voice strangely calm. "There are 3 men in the woods. They have cameras and something else. Something that makes the dogs feel sick." Detective Mills immediately radioed for backup, while Marcus grabbed the baseball bat he kept by the door. But before anyone could move, the dogs took off running toward the woods, barking ferociously. Tommy started to follow, but Elena caught him, pulling him back into the house. They heard men shouting, the sounds of running, car doors slamming, engines starting. 5 minutes later, the dogs returned, Duke carrying something in his mouth. It was a tranquilizer gun. Detective Mills examined the weapon carefully. "This is military grade, the kind used for large animal capture. The dose in here would have knocked out a full-grown German shepherd instantly." "Or a small boy," Marcus said grimly, pulling Tommy closer. Tommy was studying the tranquilizer gun with that unsettling intensity. "They wanted to take the dogs first," he said quietly. "Then me." The dogs could smell their plan. They had cages in their van, and needles, and something that smelled like the hospital but wrong. That night, the Rivera family didn't sleep. They sat together in the living room, the dogs forming a protective circle around them. Tommy was unusually quiet, his hand resting on Luna's head, occasionally whimpering as if he was seeing things through her eyes that he didn't want to see. "They're not going to stop," Tommy finally said, his young voice heavy with understanding beyond his years. "The man with the white hair, Victor's brother, he thinks I'm the key to something. He has scientists who want to study my brain. They want to know how I can hear the animals." "We won't let them take you," Elena said fiercely, holding her son tighter. Tommy looked up at his mother with sad eyes. "But what if other kids could learn to do what I do? What if studying me could help people?" "Not like this," Marcus said firmly. "Not with people who use tranquilizer guns and try to kidnap children. If you want to help science understand your gift, we'll find legitimate researchers, people we can trust." The next morning brought a new crisis. When they arrived at the rehabilitation center, they found chaos. 12 of the rescued animals were violently ill, showing signs of poisoning. Dr. Chen was frantically trying to save them, pumping stomachs, administering activated charcoal, running IVs. "Someone put something in the food supply," she said, tears streaming down her face as she worked on a cat that had been rescued from a hoarding situation just weeks before. "It must have happened overnight." Tommy immediately went to work, moving from animal to animal, his hands gentle, his voice soothing. But something was different this time. As he touched each sick animal, he would gasp, his face contorting in pain. "Tommy, what's wrong?" Elena asked, alarmed. "I can feel it," Tommy whispered, his skin pale and clammy. "The poison. It's not just making them sick, it's blocking something. It's making it harder for me to hear them." Dr. Chen looked up sharply from her work. "What kind of poison could do that?" Tommy closed his eyes, his hand on a sick dog's head. "It's not meant for them. It's meant for me. They're testing something. They want to know if they can break my connection to the animals." The realization was chilling. Someone was using the rescued animals as test subjects, trying to find a way to neutralize Tommy's abilities. It was cruel on multiple levels, hurting innocent animals while simultaneously trying to manipulate a child's gift. Detective Mills arrived with a forensics team, but Tommy already knew what they would find. The poison was in the new bag of food, the one delivered yesterday. The delivery man wasn't the regular one. He had a scar on his left hand and he was nervous. The animals didn't trust him, but no one was here to notice. Sure enough, when they checked the security footage, there was a different delivery driver. And when they enhanced the image, a scar was visible on his left hand. The regular driver was found tied up in his own truck 2 towns over, unharmed but traumatized. Over the next 2 days, Tommy worked tirelessly to help the poisoned animals. But each time he connected with one, he seemed to absorb some of their suffering. His parents watched their vibrant son grow pale and weak, dark circles forming under his eyes. "We have to stop," Elena finally insisted, when Tommy nearly collapsed while working with a poisoned rabbit. "This is killing you." "If I stop, they die," Tommy said simply, and continued working. It was Luna who finally intervened. The loyal German shepherd, who had never left Tommy's side, suddenly blocked him from approaching the next sick animal. She stood firm, using her body to push Tommy toward a chair, then sat on his feet to keep him in place. "Luna says I need to rest," Tommy admitted reluctantly. "She says I can't help them if I make myself too sick." While Tommy rested, forced to stay still by Luna's protective presence, Chen made a disturbing discovery. The poison wasn't just any toxin. It was a synthetic compound specifically designed to interfere with neurotransmitters associated with empathy and nonverbal communication. "This is advanced neuroscience," she said, showing the test results to Detective Mills. "Whoever created this has access to serious research facilities and a deep understanding of brain chemistry. This isn't some backyard operation." Detective Mills' investigation revealed the terrifying truth. The Biological Research Foundation was a front for a much larger organization with international reach. They had been studying cases of human-animal communication for years, believing it could be weaponized for military purposes. Imagine soldiers who could use animals as spies, or interrogators who could read thoughts through animal intermediaries. "Tommy's abilities are the strongest they've ever documented," Detective Mills explained to the horrified parents. "They think if they can understand how his brain works, they can replicate it, enhance it, maybe even create it artificially in others." "Over my dead body," Marcus said, his fists clenched. But the Foundation wasn't going to give up easily. The next day, a woman in an expensive suit arrived at the cottage with a briefcase and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She introduced herself as Dr. Margaret Sterling from the Biological Research Foundation. "Mr. and Mrs. Rivera, I'm here to make you an offer," she said, sitting uninvited at their kitchen table. "We're prepared to pay $10 million for Tommy to participate in a 6-month research study. He would live in our state-of-the-art facility, receive the best education, and be helping to advance human understanding immeasurably." "He's 11 years old," Elena said coldly. "He's not going anywhere." Dr. Sterling's smile tightened. "I understand your concerns. Perhaps we could arrange for you to live at the facility as well. We could employ Mr. Rivera in our construction department, and Mrs. Rivera, your teaching credentials would be valuable in our education program." "The answer is no," Marcus said firmly. Dr. Sterling placed a tablet on the table, showing video footage that made the Rivera's blood run cold. It was Tommy at school, at the store, at the rehabilitation center, taken from multiple angles over several weeks. "We've been watching, Doctor," Sterling said, her tone shifting from friendly to threatening. "We know Tommy's routines, his vulnerabilities. Did you know he walks alone from his classroom to the library every Tuesday and Thursday? That there's a blind spot in the school's security cameras near the gymnasium? Are you threatening our son?" Elena stood up, her voice shaking with rage. "I'm simply pointing out that Tommy's safety depends on many factors, Doctor," Sterling replied smoothly. "In our facility, he would be completely protected. Out here," she shrugged. At that moment, Tommy walked in from the living room, all 4 German shepherds flanking him. He looked directly at Dr. Sterling, with those unsettling 2 old eyes. "You're scared," he said simply. "Not of us, but of the people you work for. They've threatened your daughter, haven't they? Sophie, age 7, lives with your ex-husband in Portland. They said they'd hurt her if you don't bring me to them." Dr. Sterling's composed facade cracked, her face going pale. "How could you possibly—" "The dogs can smell your fear," Tommy explained. "It's different from aggressive fear. It's the fear of a mother. Luna knows that fear. She had puppies once, before she was abandoned at the water tower. She recognizes it in you. For a moment, Doctor." Sterling's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly composed herself. "It doesn't matter what you know. They want you, and they always get what they want." "Who are they?" Detective Mills asked, having been listening from the next room with a recording device. Dr. Sterling stood to leave, but Tommy spoke again. "The Prometheus Group. They're the ones funding everything. They have facilities in 12 countries. They've been taking special children for years, children who can do things others can't. Most of them don't come back. Dr. Sterling walked out without another word, but the damage was done. The Riveras now knew they were dealing with something much bigger and more dangerous than they had imagined. That night, Tommy couldn't sleep. He sat with the dogs in a tight circle, all of them alert and watchful. Around midnight, he gasped, his eyes flying wide. "They're coming," he whispered. "Not here, but to the school. They're going to take my friend Jamie. She can see colors around people that tell her how they're feeling. They think if they have her, I'll come for her." Marcus immediately called Detective Mills, who contacted the police in Jamie's district. They arrived just in time to stop a kidnapping attempt, catching 3 men trying to break into the house. But the message was clear. The Prometheus group was willing to hurt other children to get to Tommy. The next few days were a blur of activity. The FBI got involved, investigating the Prometheus group's activities. More families came forward, telling stories of gifted children who had disappeared, of research facilities that operated outside the law, of experiments that treated human beings like laboratory animals. Tommy worked with the FBI, using his abilities to help them understand what they were dealing with. He could sense things in the evidence they brought. A rescued child's toy that still carried the emotional imprint of fear. A photograph that made the dogs growl because they could somehow sense the evil of the person in it. But the strain was taking its toll. Tommy was having seizures now, his brain overwhelmed by the constant flow of information from the animals around him. Dr. Chen was deeply concerned. "His neural pathways are overloading," she explained to his parents. "It's like he's developed hypersensitivity. Every animal for miles is unconsciously sending him signals and he can't turn it off. They tried everything. Meditation, medication, even a Faraday cage to block electromagnetic signals. Nothing worked. Tommy was drowning in a sea of animal consciousness, unable to filter out the noise. It was Luna who found the solution. One night, as Tommy writhed in his bed, overwhelmed by the mental voices of every creature in the forest, Luna did something extraordinary. She placed her paw on Tommy's chest and somehow created a buffer, a filter that allowed Tommy to hear only her calm, steady thoughts. "She's teaching me to build walls," Tommy gasped, his breathing slowly returning to normal. Not to keep the animals out, but to let them in one at a time. Over the next week, with Luna's help, Tommy learned to control his gift in a way he never had before. He could dial it up or down, focusing on specific animals or blocking them out entirely. It was exhausting work, but it gave him back some control over his life. Meanwhile, the investigation into the Prometheus group was yielding disturbing results. They had facilities hidden in remote locations, islands, underground bunkers, places where they conducted experiments on children with various gifts. Some children could predict weather patterns days in advance. Others could find water in any environment. A few, like Tommy, could communicate with animals. "They're trying to weaponize human evolution," the lead FBI agent explained. "They believe these children represent the next step in human development, and they want to control that development for their own purposes." The government offered the Rivera family witness protection, a new identity in a new state. But Tommy refused. "If we run, they'll just hurt other kids," he said with determination that seemed impossible for his age. "We have to stop them." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Sterling contacted them again, this time through Detective Mills. She wanted to meet, she said, and she had information that could bring down the entire Prometheus group. They met in a public park, surrounded by FBI agents posing as joggers and dog walkers. Dr. Sterling looked haggard, frightened, but determined. "They killed a child," she said without preamble. "A little boy in their European facility. He could breathe underwater, hold his breath for an hour. They pushed him too hard, tried to extend his ability artificially. He drowned in their testing pool." She pulled out a flash drive. "Everything's on here. Financial records, facility locations, names of everyone involved, videos of the experiments. I've been gathering evidence for months, waiting for the right moment." "Why now?" Detective Mills asked. Dr. Sterling looked at Tommy. "Because you were right. They threatened my daughter. But when you knew that, when you saw my fear for her, you didn't use it against me. You showed me compassion. These people I work for, they would never do that. They see compassion as weakness." Tommy stood up and walked over to Dr. Sterling, Luna by his side as always. "Your daughter is safe," he said. I asked the animals in Portland to watch over her. The crows follow her to school. The neighborhood dogs bark if strangers come near. Even the mice in your ex-husband's house will warn them if danger comes." Dr. Sterling broke down crying. "How is this possible? How can you do these things?" "I don't control them," Tommy explained gently. "I just ask them to help, and they choose to do it. Animals understand protecting children. It's instinct for them." The information on the flash drive was everything they needed. Within 48 hours, coordinated raids were conducted on Prometheus Group facilities worldwide. Hundreds of children were rescued, many of whom had been missing for years. The organization's leaders were arrested, their assets frozen, their research seized. But the victory came with a cost. The Prometheus Group, in their death throes, released information about Tommy and other gifted children to the media. Within hours, the story was everywhere. The boy who talks to animals became international news. Religious groups called him everything from a prophet to a demon. Scientists demanded to study him. Desperate people with missing pets flooded them with requests for help. The cottage was surrounded by media, curious onlookers, and protesters. Some held signs saying Tommy was a miracle. Others claimed he was an abomination. The German shepherds patrolled constantly, keeping strangers at bay, but the stress was overwhelming. "We can't live like this," Elena said, watching Tommy peer out the window at the crowd. He looked so small, so young, despite everything he had been through. It was then that an unexpected ally emerged, a billionaire named Robert Chen, doctor. Sarah Chen's estranged brother arrived in a convoy of black SUVs. He was a tech mogul who had made his fortune in artificial intelligence, and he had a proposal. "I own an island," he said simply, 500 acres off the coast of Maine. It has a full infrastructure, homes, a school, medical facilities. I bought it as a retreat for my employees, but I want to turn it into a sanctuary for gifted children like Tommy, a place where they can learn to use their abilities safely, without fear of exploitation. Marcus was skeptical. "What's in it for you?" Robert Chen smiled sadly. "Redemption, Mr. Rivera. I spent my life building machines that think. But your son has shown me that true intelligence, true connection, isn't about processing power or algorithms. It's about empathy, understanding, the bonds between living things. I want to protect that. I want to protect him and others like him." Tommy, who had been quiet during the discussion, suddenly spoke up. "The island has dolphins. They've been waiting for someone who can hear them. They have stories about the deep waters, about things humans have never seen." Robert Chen's eyes widened. "You can sense the island from here?" "Not me," Tommy said. "Luna can smell it on your clothes. Salt water, pine trees, seal colonies. She's showing me what she smells, and I can feel the animals that must be there." The decision to move to the island wasn't easy. It meant leaving everything familiar, starting over again. But after much discussion, the Rivera family agreed. The island, christened Haven Island, would become not just their new home, but a revolutionary facility for understanding and protecting gifted children. The move happened quickly and secretly. One morning, the media arrived to find the cottage empty, the Rivera family gone. They had left in the middle of the night, transported by Robert Chen's private jet to their new home. Haven Island was more beautiful than they had imagined. Dense forests, rocky beaches, meadows full of wildflowers. The main compound was built in harmony with the environment, using sustainable technology and designed to blend into the landscape. There were homes for a dozen families, a state-of-the-art school, doctor, Chen's new veterinary facility, and research laboratories that looked more like comfortable libraries than sterile medical facilities. Other families with gifted children began arriving within weeks. There was Marcus, a boy who could predict earthquakes days in advance, Sarah, who could heal plants with her touch, David, who could navigate anywhere in the world without a map or compass, following magnetic fields like a human migraine bird. But Tommy remained unique in his connection to animals. On the island, surrounded by wildlife and free from the fear of exploitation, his abilities flourished in ways no one had anticipated. He began to understand not just individual animals, but entire ecosystems. He could sense the health of the ocean through the fish, predict weather changes through the behavior of birds, even detect pollution levels through the distress of microscopic organisms. Dr. Chen, now permanently relocated to the island, worked with Tommy to document and understand his abilities. They discovered that his brain showed unique patterns of activity in regions associated with mirror neurons and empathy, but also in areas typically dormant in most humans. It's as if his brain has unlocked pathways that evolution built but never fully activated, she explained to a carefully selected group of scientists who had been cleared to visit the island. He's not supernatural, he's just using capabilities we all have but can't access. The 4 German shepherds adapted to island life perfectly. Duke loved swimming in the ocean, his powerful body cutting through waves as he played with the seals. Max became the island's unofficial security chief, patrolling the perimeter and alerting everyone to approaching boats. Bella spent her time with the younger children, her gentle nature making her the perfect companion for kids struggling to understand their gifts. And Luna, as always, never left Tommy's side. One evening, about 3 months after arriving on the island, Tommy was sitting on the beach with his parents watching the sunset. The dogs were playing in the surf, and for a moment, everything felt peaceful. "Are you happy here?" Elena asked her son. Tommy considered the question seriously. "The animals are happy. They're not afraid here. Neither are the kids. Everyone can just be themselves without worrying about being taken or studied or hurt." "That's not what I asked," Elena said gently. "Are you happy?" Tommy looked at Luna, who had come to sit beside him, her fur still damp from the ocean. "I don't know if happy is the right word. I feel useful, like this is what I'm supposed to be doing, helping animals and people understand each other." Marcus put his arm around his son. "You've done so much already. You saved those puppies, exposed the drug ring, brought down the Prometheus group. You're allowed to just be a kid sometimes." Tommy smiled, a rare, genuine smile that reminded his parents that, despite everything, he was still just 11 years old. "But I am being a kid. I play with the dogs, I go to school, I have friends now who understand what it's like to be different. I just also happen to talk to animals." As if to emphasize his point, a pod of dolphins appeared in the bay, leaping and calling. Tommy stood up, wading into the shallow water, and the dolphins came closer, their sleek bodies brushing against his legs. "They're saying welcome home," Tommy translated, laughing as one dolphin splashed him playfully. "They've been waiting for us for a long time." But even on the island, complete safety was an illusion. The Prometheus group had been destroyed, but there were others who had taken notice of Haven Island and its special inhabitants. Governments wanted to recruit the children for intelligence work. Corporations saw potential profit in their abilities. And there were still those who believed the children were either divine or demonic, neither of which boded well for their safety. One night, Tommy woke suddenly, not from a nightmare, but from a warning. Every animal on the island was agitated. The birds were calling alarm. The deer were running for deeper forest. Even the fish were diving for deeper waters. "Something's coming," Tommy told his parents, who had learned to trust his warnings implicitly. From the water, the dolphins saw them, men in black boats with no lights. "They'll be here in an hour." The island's security team, led by a former Navy SEAL named Captain James, who had a gifted daughter of his own, immediately went into action. They had drilled for this possibility, but everyone had hoped it would never happen. "How many?" Captain James asked Tommy. Tommy closed his eyes, connecting with the sea life around the approaching boats. 3 boats. 6 men in each. They have tranquilizer guns and nets. They're not trying to kill anyone. They want to take us alive." "Who are they?" Robert Chen asked, having been roused from his home. Tommy's face went pale as he delved deeper into the connection. "The sharks are following the boats. They can sense electromagnetic signatures. The equipment these men have, it's military, but not American. The dolphins think Eastern European. They recognize similar boats from their migrations." Captain James immediately contacted the Coast Guard and the FBI, but the nearest help was 2 hours away. They would have to defend themselves. What happened next became legend on Haven Island. Tommy, working with the other gifted children, orchestrated a defense that no military strategist could have anticipated. Marcus, the earthquake predictor, sensed the exact moment to trigger the island's sonic deterrence, disorienting the attackers. Sarah used her plant abilities to cause the kelp forests to entangle the boat's propellers. David guided the security team through the darkness with perfect precision, but it was Tommy and the animals who truly turned the tide. The dolphins began circling the boats, creating whirlpools that made approach impossible. Seabirds dove at the attackers, forcing them to take cover. Even the seals joined in, barking so loudly that communication between the boats became impossible. The 4 German shepherds took their positions around Tommy, who stood on the beach like a conductor, orchestrating a symphony of nature. His eyes were closed, his arms outstretched, connected to every living thing in the water and air. "They're retreating," he announced after what felt like hours but had been only minutes. "The leader is calling it off. He's saying something about the mission being compromised, that they didn't expect this level of resistance." As the boats disappeared into the darkness, tracked by dolphins who would follow them for miles to ensure they didn't return, everyone on the island began to realize the true implications of what had just happened. They had defended themselves, yes, but they had also revealed the extent of their capabilities to whoever had been watching. "We need to make the island more secure," Robert Chen said at the emergency meeting that followed. "This won't be the last attempt." But Tommy had a different idea. What if instead of hiding, we show the world what we're really doing here? What if we invite people to see that we're not weapons to be used or threats to be eliminated? We're just kids who want to help. It was a risk, but Tommy's intuition had never been wrong. Over the next few weeks, they carefully opened Haven Island to selected visitors. Journalists who had proven trustworthy, scientists who genuinely wanted to understand rather than exploit, even government officials who needed to see that the children were assets to protect, not resources to harvest. Tommy became the unofficial ambassador, demonstrating his abilities not as party tricks, but as practical applications. He helped marine biologists understand whale migration patterns that had puzzled them for decades. He assisted in rescuing oil-soaked birds by knowing exactly what each bird needed for recovery. He even helped locate missing hikers by connecting with the animals that had seen them pass. The German shepherds were part of every demonstration, showing how the human-animal bond could be stronger than anyone had imagined. Duke's therapy work with traumatized children, Max's search and rescue capabilities enhanced by Tommy's translations, Bella's uncanny ability to detect illness in humans, a skill Tommy had helped her develop, and Luna's role as Tommy's protector and partner. Slowly, public opinion began to shift. The children of Haven Island weren't freaks or weapons. They were the next step in human understanding of the natural world. Universities established partnerships with the island. Conservation groups sought their help in protecting endangered species. Even the military, initially interested in weaponization, began to see the value in cooperation rather than control. But the most significant change came from the children themselves. As they grew in their abilities, guided by mentors who respected rather than exploited them, they began to discover that their gifts could work in harmony. Tommy could translate the animals' warnings about environmental changes. Marcus could predict the geological impacts. Sarah could help plants adapt. David could guide evacuations. Together, they were becoming something unprecedented, a living early warning system for the planet itself. 1 year after the failed attack on the island, Tommy stood before the United Nations, Luna by his side, the other 3 German shepherds waiting in the wings. At 12 years old, he was the youngest person ever to address the General Assembly. "You call us gifted," he began, his voice clear and strong, "but we're not the gifts. The real gift is the connection between all living things. We've just remembered how to feel it. The animals have been trying to tell us things for centuries, about the health of our oceans, the changes in our climate, the consequences of our actions. We haven't been listening. But now, through kids like me, you can hear them." He paused, looking around the room at representatives from every nation on Earth. "The puppies I saved from the water tower taught me something. They were left to die because they were inconvenient, because they had seen something someone wanted to hide. How many warnings from nature have we ignored because they're inconvenient? How many cries for help have we dismissed because we couldn't understand the language?" Luna pressed against his leg, offering support, and Tommy drew strength from her presence. "We're not asking you to give us special treatment or to use us for your purposes. We're asking you to listen, to the animals, to the plants, to the planet itself. We're all connected. What hurts one part of the web hurts all of it. What heals one part heals all of it." The speech was broadcast worldwide. In living rooms and classrooms, cafes and offices, people watched this young boy with his loyal dog and heard something that transcended politics and borders. He wasn't preaching or condemning. He was simply translating a message that had always been there, waiting for someone to hear it. The impact was immediate and far-reaching. Environmental protection laws were strengthened based on the warnings Tommy and the other children provided. Wildlife conservation efforts were restructured to account for the communication networks between species that Tommy had revealed. Even urban planning began to consider the needs of animals as residents, not just obstacles. But perhaps the most profound change was in how people saw their own pets and the animals around them. Children especially began paying closer attention, trying to understand what their dogs and cats were telling them. While few had Tommy's level of ability, many discovered they could sense more than they had realized. Empathy, it turned out, was a muscle that grew stronger with use. Back on Haven Island, life settled into a new rhythm. The school expanded, taking in not just gifted children, but their siblings, creating a true community. Dr. Chen's research continued, now funded by international grants and conducted with full transparency. The island became a model for how human development could work in harmony with nature rather than in opposition to it. Tommy continued to grow in his abilities, but also in his simple humanity. He played soccer on the beach with the other kids, struggled with algebra homework, had crushes on classmates, and argued with his parents about screen time. The 4 German shepherds remained his constant companions, each teaching him different lessons about loyalty, courage, gentleness, and love. One evening, as Tommy sat on the dock watching the sunset, all 4 dogs arranged around him. His mother asked him a question that had been bothering her for years. "Tommy, that day at the water tower, how did you really know the puppies were there? We were so far away, and you'd never shown that ability before." Tommy was quiet for a long moment, his hand absently stroking Luna's fur. "I think they called me," he finally said. "Not just those 4 puppies, but all the animals who needed help. It was like the universe decided it was time for someone to hear them, and I was the one listening at the right moment." "Do you ever wish it had been someone else?" his father asked, joining them on the dock. Tommy looked at his parents, then at the 4 dogs who had changed his life so dramatically. Duke, now gray around the muzzle but still strong. Max, alert and protective as ever. Bella, gentle and wise. Luna, his soul's companion. "Never," he said firmly. "Every hard thing that's happened, every scary moment, it all led to this. To Haven Island, to helping all these kids, to showing the world that we can do better. If I hadn't heard those puppies crying, none of this would exist." As if in agreement, Luna stood and licked his face, making him laugh. The other dogs joined in, creating a pile of fur and wagging tails that had his parents laughing too. In that moment, they were just a family enjoying a beautiful evening, the weight of Tommy's gift temporarily forgotten in the simple joy of being together. But even as they laughed and played, Tommy could feel the network of consciousness around him. The fish in the sea, the birds in the trees, the insects in the grass. All of them part of an interconnected web of life that most humans had forgotten existed. He was their translator, their bridge to the human world, and that responsibility would always be with him. That night, as Tommy lay in bed with Luna curled beside him and the other dogs scattered around his room, he felt a new presence in the network. Somewhere, maybe hundreds of miles away, another child had just made their first real connection with an animal. He could feel their wonder, their fear, their excitement. "It's okay," he whispered into the darkness, hoping somehow his message would reach them. "You're not alone. We're all connected." Luna's tail thumped once in agreement, and Tommy smiled. The boy who had saved 4 German Shepherd puppies from a water tower had become something he never could have imagined, a beacon of hope for a world learning to listen again. And it had all started with a child's willingness to believe that cries for help should never be ignored, no matter what form they took. The morning Tommy turned 13 brought changes no one could have predicted. He woke not to Luna's gentle nudging, but to a silence so complete it felt like the world had stopped breathing. Every animal on Haven Island had gone quiet. The birds weren't singing, the insects weren't buzzing, even the waves seemed to lap more softly against the shore. Luna was sitting upright beside his bed, her amber eyes fixed on something beyond the window that only she could see. "What is it, girl?" Tommy whispered, placing his hand on her head. The moment they connected, images flooded his mind, not from Luna, but from animals everywhere. Wolves in Yellowstone, elephants in Africa, whales in every ocean, all sending the same message. Something ancient had awakened, something that needed Tommy's help. His parents found him on the beach an hour later. surrounded by every animal on the island. Deer stood beside foxes, seabirds perched next to mice, all natural enmity forgotten in the face of whatever was calling them. The 4 German shepherds formed their usual protective circle around Tommy, but even they seemed subdued, aware that this was bigger than anything they had faced before. "Tommy, what's happening?" Elena asked, her voice tight with worry. Tommy's eyes were distant, seeing something far beyond the horizon. "They're all connected right now, every animal on Earth. It's like they're downloading information into my head. There's something coming, something that will affect every living thing on the planet." Dr. Chen arrived with her monitoring equipment, immediately noting that Tommy's brain activity was off the charts. His neural patterns are unlike anything I've ever recorded. It's as if his brain is acting as a receiver for millions of signals at once. Over the next several hours, as Tommy remained in his trance-like state, strange reports began coming in from around the world. Animals everywhere were exhibiting unusual behavior. Migrations were stopping mid-route. Predators and prey were gathering together peacefully. Domesticated animals were refusing to leave their owners' sides. Robert Chen convened an emergency meeting with the island's residents and their international advisors via video link. "Whatever's happening, it's global. We need to understand it before governments start panicking." It was Marcus, the earthquake-sensitive boy, who provided the first clue. "I can feel something in the earth," he said, his face pale. "Not an earthquake, but movement. Like the planet itself is adjusting." Sarah, who could communicate with plants, added her own observation. "Every plant on the island is growing faster. Their root systems are expanding, reaching deeper. They're preparing for something." As the sun set, Tommy finally stirred. When he opened his eyes, they were filled with a knowledge that seemed both terrible and wonderful. "I need to speak to everyone," he said, his voice hoarse. "Not just the island. Everyone." Within an hour, Robert Chen had arranged a global broadcast. Every major news network agreed to carry it live, understanding that something unprecedented was happening. Tommy sat in the island's communication center, the 4 German shepherds at his feet, Luna's head resting on his lap. "My name is Tommy Rivera," he began, looking directly into the camera. 13 years ago, I was just a normal kid. Then I saved 4 puppies from a water tower, and my life changed forever. I learned I could hear what animals were thinking, feel what they were feeling. Today, every animal on Earth has spoken to me, and I need to share their message with you." He paused, gathering his thoughts, feeling the weight of billions of creatures depending on him to get this right. "The Earth is sick," he continued. "Not dying, but sick. The animals have known this for decades, trying to warn us through their changing patterns, their distress, their adaptations. But we haven't been listening. Now, the planet itself is going to heal, with or without our cooperation. In 72 hours, something is going to happen that will change everything." Governments around the world immediately went into crisis mode. Some thought it was a hoax, others believed Tommy was predicting a natural disaster. But those who had followed his work over the years knew better than to dismiss his warnings. "What exactly is going to happen?" a reporter asked during the question period that followed. Tommy closed his eyes, consulting with the vast network of animal consciousness. "The Earth's magnetic field is going to shift. Not reverse, but recalibrate. For 3 days, every living thing will be connected in a way we've never experienced before. Humans will feel what animals feel. Animals will understand human thoughts. The barriers between species will temporarily dissolve." The implications were staggering. Scientists scrambled to verify Tommy's prediction, and to their amazement, they found subtle changes in magnetic readings that supported his claim. Astronomers detected unusual solar activity that could trigger such an event. Biologists noted that many species had similar magnetic sensitive capabilities that could theoretically link them in the way Tommy described. On Haven Island, preparations began immediately. If Tommy was right, the world was about to experience something that would either unite humanity with nature or drive it to madness. The gifted children would be crucial in helping people navigate this unprecedented event. "We need guides," Tommy explained to the assembled families. "People who can help others understand what they're experiencing. Every person with any sensitivity to animals needs to be ready to translate, to calm, to bridge the gap." The German Shepherds seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. Duke began visiting every family on the island, offering comfort and stability. Max patrolled more vigilantly than ever, as if protecting against an invisible threat. Bella spent her time with the youngest children, helping them prepare for what was coming, and Luna never left Tommy's side, their connection now so strong that they often moved in perfect synchronization. As the first day passed, subtle changes began manifesting worldwide. People reported unusually vivid dreams about animals. Pets became more attentive, seeming to understand complex conversations. Wild animals ventured closer to human settlements, not aggressively, but curiously. Tommy spent these hours in constant communication with the global animal network, trying to understand the full scope of what was coming. What he learned both thrilled and terrified him. "It's not random," he told Dr. Chen. "This has happened before, maybe every few thousand years. It's how evolution jumps forward, how species learn to adapt together instead of separately. The last time it happened, humans were just beginning to develop language. This time..." He paused, overwhelmed by the implications. "This time, we might finally understand that we're not separate from nature. We're part of it." On the second day, the connections grew stronger. People around the world reported hearing their pets' thoughts, not in words, but in feelings and images. A mother in Japan suddenly understood why her cat had been bringing her dead mice. It thought she was a poor hunter and was trying to feed her. A farmer in Iowa felt his cattle's contentment as they grazed, their simple joy in sweet grass and sunshine. A child in Brazil discovered she could sense what the parrots in the rainforest were seeing from high in the canopy. But not all connections were pleasant. Hunters felt the terror of their prey. People eating meat experienced flashes of slaughterhouse fear. Those who had abandoned pets were overwhelmed by feelings of betrayal and loneliness. The hidden cruelties of humanity's relationship with animals were suddenly, unavoidably exposed. Panic began to spread. Hospitals reported a surge in people claiming to be going insane. Governments considered declaring states of emergency. Some religious groups proclaimed it the end times, while others saw it as a divine awakening. Tommy knew he had to act. With the help of the other gifted children and the island's resources, they launched a 24-hour support network. Through social media, television, radio, and every available platform, they provided guidance on how to handle the connections. "Don't fight it," Tommy advised in one broadcast. Luna pressed against his side for support. "The fear you're feeling isn't yours. It's theirs. Every animal you're connecting with has generations of fear of humans built into their genetic memory. Show them we can be different. Send them thoughts of peace, of safety. Remember, they're as scared as you are." The German Shepherds became unexpected celebrities during this time. Videos of them working with Tommy, showing the deep trust and communication possible between humans and animals, went viral. Duke's gentle therapy work, Max's protective instincts, Bella's empathic healing, and Luna's profound bond with Tommy became examples of what human-animal relationships could be. As the third day dawned, the connection reached its peak. Tommy found himself at the center of a vast web of consciousness that spanned the entire planet. Through him, millions of humans were able to experience the animal perspective more clearly. He became a living translator, helping both sides understand each other. But something else was happening, something the animals hadn't told him about because they hadn't known. The connection wasn't just between living creatures, it was awakening something in the earth itself. Tommy could feel it through the root systems of trees, the mycelial networks in the soil, the currents in the ocean. The planet was alive in a way science had never imagined, and it was trying to communicate. "Mom, Dad," Tommy gasped, reaching for his parents' hands. "I need you to anchor me. I'm going too deep." Marcus and Elena held their son as his body convulsed with the effort of processing impossible amounts of information. The 4 German shepherds formed a tight circle around them, their own bodies trembling as they shared Tommy's burden. Through Tommy's connection, a message began to form, not in words or images, but in pure understanding. The Earth was offering humanity a choice. Continue on the current path of destruction and face increasingly severe natural corrections, or accept their role as part of the global ecosystem and work in harmony with all life. But it wasn't a threat. It was an invitation. The planet was offering to teach humanity what indigenous peoples had always known. that the Earth was not a resource to be exploited, but a living system to be part of. The temporary connection between all species was a glimpse of what was possible if humans chose cooperation over domination. Tommy's voice, when he spoke, seemed to carry the weight of every living thing on Earth. "We have 72 hours to decide," he announced through the emergency broadcast system. 3 days to show the Earth that we understand, that we're willing to change. Every action we take during this time will be felt by every living thing. Every kindness will ripple outward. Every cruelty will be magnified. We're all connected now. What we do to others, we do to ourselves. The response was immediate and varied. Some people, overwhelmed by the connection, retreated into isolation. Others embraced it, running to forests and beaches to immerse themselves in nature. Cities saw mass liberations of animals from pet stores and zoos, though many animals chose to stay, having formed genuine bonds with their caretakers. On Haven Island, the gifted children worked around the clock to help guide the global transformation. Marcus used his earthquake sensitivity to help people understand the Earth's geological responses to human activity. Sarah worked with agricultural communities to show them how to farm in harmony with plant consciousness. David helped navigate the new magnetic fields that were affecting migration patterns and weather systems. But it was Tommy who bore the greatest burden. As the primary conduit for the planetary consciousness, he was experiencing every emotion, every connection, every moment of understanding or rejection. His parents watched their 13-year-old son age before their eyes, not physically, but in the depth of knowledge and sorrow in his gaze. "It's too much for him," Elena pleaded with Dr. Chen. "He's just a child." Dr. Chen, monitoring Tommy's vitals, was deeply concerned but also amazed. "His brain is doing something impossible. He's processing more information than any human should be able to handle. But look, his vital signs are stable. It's as if the animals are sharing the load, distributing the burden across millions of conscious beings." Indeed, the 4 German shepherds hadn't left Tommy's side for 48 hours. They were his filters, his anchors, his connection to his own humanity. Duke provided steadiness when the flow threatened to overwhelm him. Max stood guard against the darker emotions that tried to consume him. Bella offered healing for the pain he absorbed from suffering creatures. And Luna, always Luna, was his lifeline back to himself when he traveled too deep into the collective consciousness. As the final day progressed, something beautiful began to happen. All over the world, people started making different choices. Factories that had been polluting rivers shut down voluntarily as their owners felt the suffering of aquatic life. Hunters laid down their weapons, not from guilt, but from understanding that there were other ways to live. Children who had been afraid of dogs suddenly understood that the barking was just communication, not aggression. But the most profound changes happened in the places of greatest cruelty. Factory farms opened their doors, unable to continue once their workers felt the animals' suffering. Laboratories that tested on animals shut down as scientists experienced what their subjects had endured. Even hardened criminals in prisons reported feeling the pain they had caused through the eyes of witness animals. Pets who had seen domestic violence, strays who had watched murders, birds who had observed crimes from above. Tommy felt all of it, the good and the bad, the transformation and the resistance. By the evening of the 3rd day, he was barely conscious, held upright only by his parents' arms and the warm presence of the dogs. "It's almost over," he whispered. "The connection is starting to fade. But it won't disappear completely. We've been changed, all of us." As the sun set on the 3rd day, the intense connection began to diminish, not all at once but gradually, like a tide going out. People found they could still sense animals' emotions, but not with the overwhelming intensity of the past 3 days. Animals retained a greater understanding of human intent, but returned to their natural behaviors. Tommy collapsed the moment the full connection ended, falling into a sleep so deep that Dr. Chen initially feared he had gone into a coma, but his vital signs remained strong, and the German shepherd's calm presence suggested he was simply recovering from an ordeal beyond human comprehension. He slept for 18 hours straight, and when he woke, the world had changed. The United Nations had called an emergency session to address what was already being called the Great Connection. Environmental protection laws were being rewritten globally. Animal rights were being enshrined in constitutions. Cities were redesigning themselves to accommodate wildlife corridors. The change wasn't universal. There were still those who resisted, who denied what they had experienced. But the momentum was undeniable. "How do you feel?" Elena asked when Tommy finally opened his eyes. Tommy considered the question, his hand automatically finding Luna's fur. "Different. Like I've been stretched and can't quite shrink back to my original size. I can still feel them all, but it's quieter now. More like it used to be, but also not." Over the following weeks, as the world struggled to integrate what had happened, Tommy and the other gifted children became more important than ever. They were the bridges between the old world and the new, helping humanity understand that the connection hadn't been a one-time event but an awakening to something that had always been there. Scientists studying the phenomenon discovered that human brains had indeed been altered, with previously dormant areas now showing activity. Children born after the Great Connection showed even stronger changes, suggesting that humanity was indeed evolving, not through genetic manipulation or technology, but through consciousness itself. The German shepherds, now elderly in dog years but still vital, became symbols of the new relationship between humans and animals. Duke passed first, peacefully in his sleep, and Tommy felt it through their connection, not as an ending, but as a transformation. The old dog's consciousness seemed to disperse into the network, becoming part of the greater whole while still maintaining something essentially Duke. "He's not gone," Tommy told the grieving children at the therapy center Duke had worked at. "He's just expanded. Every dog who helps scared kids carries a little bit of Duke in them now." Max followed 6 months later, his great heart finally giving out after years of protective service. He died as he lived, standing guard, collapsing only after ensuring a group of children had made it safely through a storm. Bella lasted another year, her gentle spirit finally releasing when the last of the animals she had been helping to heal no longer needed her. Luna lived the longest, as if she knew Tommy still needed her. But as Tommy approached his 16th birthday, he could feel her preparing to leave. She was tired, having carried not just her own consciousness, but having helped Tommy bear the weight of millions. "It's okay," he told her one evening, as they sat on the beach where they had spent so many hours together. "You can go. I'll be all right." Luna looked at him with those amber eyes that had seen so much, that had shared so much. Through their connection, she showed him every moment of their time together. The rescue from the water tower, the terrifying climb, the healing, the growth, the battles fought and won, the great connection, and all the quiet moments in between. "Thank you," Tommy whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you for choosing me." Luna licked his tears away, then lay her head in his lap one last time. She passed as the sun set, with Tommy's hand on her head and the spirits of Duke, Max, and Bella seeming to gather around them in the twilight. The world mourned with Tommy. Luna's death made international news, with thousands sharing stories of how the 4 German shepherds had inspired them to better understand their own animals. A statue was erected on Haven Island, not just of Luna, but of all 4 dogs, with Tommy as a child standing among them, his hand outstretched as if inviting others to join their connection. But Luna's death wasn't an ending, it was another transformation. Tommy found that her presence in the network was stronger than ever, not as an individual consciousness, but as a part of the bridge between human and animal awareness. Every person who had learned to communicate with animals carried a piece of Luna's gift within them. As Tommy grew into adulthood, he became a leader in the new world that the Great Connection had created. He advised governments on wildlife policy, helped design cities that integrated animal habitats, and taught the growing number of children born with enhanced animal communication abilities. The island expanded, becoming a global center for interspecies communication research. The cottage where Tommy had first lived with his parents and the 4 dogs was preserved as a monument to the moment when humanity's relationship with nature fundamentally changed. But Tommy's greatest achievement wasn't in policy or science. It was in the simple daily work of showing people that the connection they had felt during those 3 days wasn't magic or madness. It was just awareness. Every person who learned to really see their pet, to understand the birds outside their window, to feel the life in the soil beneath their feet, carried forward the legacy of 4 German shepherd puppies who had been left to die in a water tower. On the 10th anniversary of the Great Connection, Tommy stood before the United Nations once again. He was 23 now, no longer the small boy who had climbed an impossible tower, but his eyes still held that same depth of understanding, that same bridge between worlds. 10 years ago, he began, the Earth gave us a gift. Not the gift of talking to animals. We've always been able to do that. We just forgot how to listen. The real gift was remembering that we're not separate from nature. We're not above it or below it. We're part of it, as essential and as vulnerable as every other species. He paused, feeling the presence of not just the assembly, but of millions of creatures following his words through the network that now connected all conscious life on Earth. A decade ago, 4 puppies taught me that every cry for help deserves an answer. That courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what's right despite the fear, that the smallest among us can make the biggest difference. Duke taught me strength. Max taught me protection. Bella taught me gentleness. And Luna taught me that love transcends species, transcends death, transcends every barrier we think divides us. The assembly was silent, many wiping away tears as they remembered their own experiences during the Great Connection, their own moments of understanding with the animals in their lives. We stand at a crossroads, Tommy continued. We can choose to forget again, to rebuild the walls between ourselves and the natural world. Or we can choose to remain connected, to honor the trust that every animal on Earth showed us when they opened their consciousness to ours. The choice we make will determine not just our future, but the future of every living thing on this planet. He looked directly into the camera, knowing that billions were watching, both human and animal. I was just a 5-year-old boy who heard puppies crying. I had no special training, no great wisdom, just a willingness to listen and to help. Each of you has that same ability. Every child who watches this, every adult who remembers what it felt like to truly connect with another species, you all have the power to be bridges between worlds. Tommy smiled, and for a moment, those watching could swear they saw the shadows of 4 German shepherds standing beside him. The animals are still talking to us. They never stopped. The question is, are we brave enough to keep listening? Are we compassionate enough to answer when they call? Are we wise enough to understand that their well-being and ours are inseparably linked? As he concluded his speech, something remarkable happened. Every animal in the vicinity of a human, pets, wildlife, even insects, made some form of contact. Dogs placed paws on their owners' laps. Cats rubbed against legs. Birds sang in harmony. It was as if the entire animal kingdom was adding their voice to Tommy's message. The 4 German shepherds I saved from that water tower saved me in return, Tommy said, his voice thick with emotion. They saved all of us by showing us what we had forgotten, that love doesn't recognize the boundaries we create, that consciousness exists in many forms, and that every life has value and purpose. Years passed. Tommy married Sarah, the girl who could heal plants, and together they had children who were born into a world where talking to animals was no longer considered impossible, but simply uncommon. Haven Island became a chain of sanctuaries around the world, each one a place where the boundaries between species blurred and the connections strengthened. The water tower still stood, now surrounded by a garden where 4 trees grew, an oak for Duke's strength, a pine for Max's vigilance, a willow for Bella's gentleness, and a dogwood for Luna's eternal companionship. Children would come to sit beneath these trees and listen, hoping to hear what Tommy had heard that day so long ago. And sometimes, when the wind was just right and their hearts were open, they could hear it. Not the crying of abandoned puppies, but the singing of a world learning to heal itself, one connection at a time. They would hear the whispers of 4 German shepherds who had refused to die in silence, whose cries for help had been answered by a brave little boy, and whose rescue had ultimately led to the rescue of the relationship between humanity and nature itself. Tommy, now in his 50s, still lived on Haven Island, still worked with animals, still felt Luna's presence in every connection he made. His children and grandchildren carried the gift forward, each in their own way, teaching a world that had almost forgotten how to listen, that the most important conversations don't always happen in words. One evening, as he sat on the same beach where Luna had passed, surrounded by his family and a collection of rescued animals that seemed to naturally gather wherever he was, Tommy's grandson asked him the question that everyone eventually asked. "Grandpa, how did you know to climb that tower? How did you know the puppies were really there?" Tommy smiled, his hand resting on the head of Luna's great-great-granddaughter, a German shepherd with the same amber eyes and gentle spirit. "I didn't know," he said honestly. "I just heard them calling, and I couldn't ignore it." Sometimes the most important moments in our lives start with just choosing to believe that what we're feeling is real, that the connection we sense isn't imagination, but invitation. He looked at his grandson, seeing the same sensitivity, the same potential bridge between worlds. "The animals are always calling to us," he continued. "Every bird's song, every dog's bark, every cat's purr. They're all invitations to remember that we're part of something bigger than ourselves. The question isn't whether we can hear them. The question is whether we're brave enough to answer." As the sun set over Haven Island, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Tommy felt the presence of Duke, Max, Bella, and Luna as strongly as he had when they were alive. They were in every dog that played on the beach, every animal that found sanctuary on the island, every child who learned to listen with their heart instead of just their ears. The boy who had climbed an impossible tower to save 4 German shepherd puppies had become a man who had helped humanity climb its own impossible tower, the one that separated human consciousness from the natural world. And while the climb wasn't over, would never truly be over, the path had been shown, the connection had been made, the bridge had been built. And it had all started with a 5-year-old boy who heard crying and chose to listen, who felt fear and chose courage, who saw separation and chose connection. Tommy Rivera's legacy wasn't just in the animals he had saved or the abilities he had developed. It was in the simple, profound truth he had demonstrated, that love transcends species, that compassion requires action, and that sometimes the smallest among us are called to do the biggest things. The 4 German shepherds had been trapped in a water tower, abandoned to die, their cries unheard by all but one small boy. But their rescue had become humanity's rescue. Their salvation had become the world's salvation. They had shown that every life matters, that every connection counts, and that every act of courage, no matter how small it seems, can ripple outward to change everything. As night fell over Haven Island, the animals settled into sleep, their consciousness joining the great network that now connected all life on Earth. And somewhere in that vast web of awareness, 4 German shepherds ran free, forever young, forever loved, forever watching over the boy who had saved them, and in doing so, had saved so much more. Their story had become legend, but more than that, it had become truth. The truth that we are all connected, that we all matter, and that love, real love, knows no boundaries. The water tower still stood, a monument to the moment when everything changed, when a child's compassion opened a door that could never be closed again. And in homes around the world, children went to sleep with their arms around their pets, knowing what Tommy had always known, that they were holding not just animals, but friends, family, teachers, and bridges, to a wider understanding of what it means to be alive on this beautiful, interconnected planet. The story of Tommy and the 4 German shepherds would be told for generations, each telling adding new details, new perspectives, new understanding. But at its heart, it would always be the same story. A story of courage, compassion, and connection. A story that reminded humanity that we are never alone, that help can come from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply listen to those who have no voice and give them one. As Tommy drifted off to sleep that night, surrounded by his family and the descendants of those 4 puppies he had saved so many years ago, he felt the world breathing around him, with him, through him. The connection that had seemed like a miracle when he was 5 was now just life itself, rich and complex and beautiful. And somewhere, in whatever realm spirits inhabit, 4 German shepherds sat watch, their vigil eternal, their love undying, their legacy living on in every person who chose connection over separation, love over fear, and courage over comfort. They had been saved from a water tower, but they had become saviors themselves, showing humanity the way back to its own heart, one paw print at a time. The boy who talked to animals had become the man who helped humanity remember its place in the family of all living things. And it had all started with 4 puppies, crying in the dark, waiting for someone to care enough to listen, brave enough to climb, and loving enough to risk everything for those who couldn't save themselves. This was their story. This was Tommy's story. This was humanity's story. And it was far from over, because somewhere, right now, an animal is calling out, waiting for someone to hear, to understand, to help. And somewhere, a child is listening, feeling that pull, that connection, that irresistible urge to answer the call. The legacy lives on, in every act of kindness between species, in every moment of understanding across the divide, in every choice to see animals not as others, but as family. The 4 German shepherds had shown the way. Tommy had opened the door. Now it was up to everyone else to walk through it. The water tower stands still, weathered but strong, a reminder that sometimes the most important rescues are the ones that seem impossible, that the smallest heroes can change the world, and that love, real, transcendent, boundary-crossing love, is the most powerful force in the universe. And if you listen carefully, on quiet nights when the wind is just right, you can still hear them. 4 puppies calling out from a water tower, not in distress now, but in joy, celebrating the moment when one small boy's courage changed everything, when 4 abandoned German shepherds became the catalyst for humanity's greatest transformation. Their story echoes through time, a reminder, a promise, a call to action. Listen, love, connect. Save those who cannot save themselves. Be the bridge between worlds, and never, ever ignore a cry for help, no matter how impossible the rescue might seem. Because sometimes, saving 4 puppies from a water tower can save the whole world. If this incredible story touched your heart and opened your eyes to the amazing connections possible between humans and animals, please like this video and share it with everyone you know. Comment below about your own experiences with animals. Have you ever felt that special connection? Have you ever known an animal was trying to tell you something? And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more amazing true stories that will restore your faith in humanity and the incredible bonds we share with all living creatures. Together, we can spread awareness about the importance of listening to and protecting our animal friends. Thank you for watching, and remember, every act of kindness, no matter how small, can change the world.